All right, I'm not sure if I'm going to finish this video all in one shot, so that's why it says part one. I'll let you know, or I'll change it if need be. But this is to go over the questions that I had for you guys to ask with the Iliad. And I think the way that I'm going to do this is I'm going to go through some of your responses on Canvas and fill in the blanks if it's needed. I'll keep these anonymous to protect the innocents. So let me just go ahead and get the assignment for the 19th up. And so question one reads, what is Achilles doing when Ajax, Phoenix, and Odysseus find him? How does this match the traditional understanding of the hero? And let me, still getting to the speed grader. Go. So A through J. Sorry about this. Okay. So the first answer that I am pulling up reads, even, oh, okay, so I got my evens and odds mixed up. That's why I wasn't showing. Okay. All right, so the first answer, they find Achilles playing the lyra with Patroclus. Matches the traditional understanding of a hero because he is rejecting the call. Yes, and that's largely true. That now, granted, Achilles has had several calls to adventure throughout this work, but it's also the lyre in some ways acts as a talisman as well. So we have a couple elements of the hero quest here, but when they initially ask if he will rejoin them, he refuses that call, and he has to be talked into it. And in a very interesting way, I think that scene is worth reviewing for the test, because I think that's a pivotal scene in the work overall. And really, you know, as we know, Achilles doesn't get back into it, into the fight until Patroclus is killed. Okay, so question two reads, what is Achilles' first reaction to the appearance of his friends? What does this say about Agamemnon's choice of messengers? Let me get one up to read. Through his anger, Achilles argues that his friends have been dishonest with him when he goes along the lines to say he hates when they say one thing while thinking something else, not staying true to themselves or Achilles. About Agamemnon's choice of messengers, there's not too much to say about the choice, but they were still thanked. Now, one thing, the first part is largely accurate. I'll get to that in a second. However, that second part, Agamemnon knows that Achilles is so angry at him that they're not going to be able to make any progress if he goes, because Achilles isn't going to listen to anything that he says because of his anger. So the biggest thing behind the choice of friends was to make sure that the message or the offer was at least heard, because he's definitely not going to take anything on unless the offer is first heard. Now, yes, Achilles accuses them of being disloyal, but of course, remember his friends are in a situation where they're trying to save their possessions too. They're trying to save the Greeks, which Achilles doesn't quite give them credit for, where I think he really should, but he doesn't because he's Achilles. But you know, the choice of friends is important because the message needs to be listened to. All right, let's take a look at number three. What kind of leader is Agamemnon? What kind of warrior is Achilles? What kind of army is the Achaean or Greek army? Now, I will say, just as a reminder, Achaean or Argo means a Greek. but this question is a bit, subjective. This is one of those things where you give evidence from the text to support your opinion. The text that I'm looking at right now, Agamemnon is a very powerful leader, but he's not the best leader there is. He gets very angry easily, and this has a lot of impact on the type of leader he is. Achilles is a very great warrior, one of the best. Agamemnon requests him to fight, and this shows that he is a great warrior. The Achaean army is very good. A very good army composed of great warriors. All this stuff is largely true. A couple things to add to it. The Achaean army, it shows how, especially these scenes with Achilles, it shows how splintered it is, how it's really a collection of independent groups that are fighting for a single cause. Yes, they speak the same language, but they don't all consider themselves from the same country. And Agamemnon is a very powerful leader, but his ambition is what's getting him into trouble. He wants to be the one to get credit for sacking the great city of Troy. And Achilles, let's be honest, is a flat-out brutal warrior, especially when he's enraged. Really desecrates Hector's body after he kills him, which was something that was just not done between nobles at that time, or really any time until the modern day. So Achilles can be disrespectful of his enemy as well. Okay, so moving on to number 4, the question asks, what role do the gods play? What role do the gods play in the Iliad? To what extent are the events of the narrative the result of independent decisions made by the heroes, and to what extent are they influenced by the intervention of the gods? Okay, so in this work, the gods control the people is quite different than we see in Oedipus. The response I have in front of me, the gods help people they want to help. Without the gods, most of the human characters would be less powerful. And that's true. And the gods in this have taken sides. Now, this is unlike Oedipus, where the god is kind of dictated the action of the play, whereas here, the gods like Thetis, Zeus, Athena, Apollo, Mercury, not Mercury, in Greece, he's Hermes. They take part in the action. Hermes helps Priam or Priam through the Greek camp. Apollo sends the plague. Athena helps out Achilles and fools Hector. Hera's involved. Achilles' mother helps him get new armor. So they're much more involved in this. I think there's a combination, really, of the two. The independent decisions of the heroes, that it kind of works both ways. The heroes will make decisions, and the gods will do something on them, and the gods will decide stuff that the human characters have to adjust to. So there is kind of a give and take there in this work, but certainly a different picture of the Greek gods than we see in Oedipus. All right, so moving on to number 5. Sorry. Number 5 reads, what is the role of women in the poem? How are they represented? How do they interact with men? Now, whenever we're working with a work that is polytheistic like this, when I ask you a question about women, I also mean goddesses as well. The answer that I have here reads, women are not treated like equals, but more of a prize to be won. Women are actually the reason for fighting. Helen was stolen to start the war, and Agamemnon took Achilles' woman to start the tension. Yeah, Briseis with the story. And that's very true, the human women especially, that they do tend to be property. Now, the goddesses, Athena and Thetis, the sea nymph, both play a big role in this work. So, but they do tend to be helping men. They're not helping women. Women seem to be, other than Andromache, who is Hector's wife, we don't see much in the way of strong women. Helen kind of, defends Paris and just complains to Hector. And then you have Briseis, who's a prize, Cresius, who's a prize, and so on. So good answer, and just wanted to add a little to it. All right, so moving on to number 6. Let's see. Number 6, what kind of warrior is Hector? Is he fighting for the same things as Achilles and Agamemnon? The answer I have, Hector is a perfect example of a warrior. He is very fierce and driven to fight. He would never harm someone that was on his side. Achilles and Agamemnon, on the other hand, are driven by rage and hate. They're not rational and focused on the kill. That's a good comparison to the other warriors. Yes, Hector's defending his city. He is the next in line for the throne, but he has no problem risking his life to make sure that his citizens are safe. And that's a really big deal as far as I'm concerned, with Hector, that he is fighting for a noble purpose, not just for glory and winnings. He's fighting for his country, which is, I think, a much more in-depth or nobler type of feat. Okay, so that was 6. Let's get to 7, which reads, what is your reaction to Agamemnon's offer to Achilles? Would you accept it? Can you think of anything that is missing? Let's see. The one that I have in front of me reads, in the Iliad, human suffering is determined, did I get the right one? Yeah, is determined by the gods. In book 22, as Achilles and Hector are charging each other with spears, the poem adds a break of italicized words that give metaphor between human suffering and the natural suffering between the predator and his prey. It talks about the eagle swooping in to grab the lamb or hare, which compares to Achilles strategically fighting the weak spot in Hector's armor. I'm not sure this one answered the correct question. Let me double check. Nope, this one doesn't seem to have the right answer. So let me go ahead and look at a different one. Agamemnon's offer to Achilles is a bribe to get him on the front line after Agamemnon realizes how much they need Achilles. I wouldn't take the offer because the girl who started this conflict was not included. It seems like Agamemnon was still prideful and couldn't give up his own desires to help his country win. And that's really the glaring omission from Agamemnon's offer. Clearly that he's not offering the girl back. And this is kind of like, you see this in sports all the time, where a big free agent or a hot, coaching commodity, somebody like that will get paid more probably than they're worth because somebody wants to make sure that they get them. Well, Agamemnon wants to make sure that he gets Achilles back on his side. Otherwise, he's simply not going to win. Okay, number 8. Why are Odysseus, Phoenix, and Ajax chosen to deliver Agamemnon's offer to Achilles? Do you think it's strange that Agamemnon doesn't join the embassy? I've kind of touched on this already, that, I don't think it's strange at all because of, remember, the first line of the poem, rage. The rage of Achilles is such that we can't trust him around Agamemnon to get the right answer. Or to think clearly, not to get the right answer, to think clearly enough to take the offer. Okay, so number 9, what do you learn about the relationship between Achilles and Patroclus? Let's see if I can find it here. They're close as brothers. They truly love each other and will do anything for the other one. Yes, that's true. And they're cousins. They've grown up together. Patroclus also kind of looks up to Achilles. So he's kind of the Achilles in training. And really, it's the closest thing to a son that Achilles is ever going to get. And I think that's an important part of this because once everything is taken away from Achilles, he's willing to do anything to defeat Troy. And that includes trying to find Hector. Why does Achilles allow Patroclus to go to battle wearing his armor? Well, let's look at the next answer that I have up in the queue. So this is number 10. The one I have in front of me reads, Achilles allows Patroclus to go into battle wearing his armor because this is the most that he could persuade Achilles to do. Patroclus tries hard to bring Achilles to the aid of the Greeks, but that fails. And also he's looking kind of as a rallying point. The Greeks see Achilles as rejoin the fight is going to give them extra oomph to want to make sure that they fight hard. Also, it's going to scare the Trojans a little bit to see Achilles out there. But it also has another benefit as well. On Achilles' side, he doesn't want Patroclus to get killed. It's the best set of armor in the Greek army. So by giving him this, he's also giving him a little bit of that paternal protection that he might want to give to Patroclus. Number 11, who are the Myrmidons and how does Homer describe them? Let me take a look at one of your entries to go ahead and figure this out. Okay, the Myrmidons are Achilles' own troops. They are the strongest warriors. It's not a very detailed answer, but it will do. The Myrmidons are his people, and not only does it keep Achilles from fighting this feud with Agamemnon, but it also keeps the troops under him from fighting, which is a good chunk of the Greek army. And certainly they're the best soldiers. So it's no wonder the Trojans are winning because their strongest warrior, the Greeks, that is, the strongest warrior for the Greeks and the strongest army for the Greeks, or section of their army, I guess you would call it like battalion or brigade, something like that. They're not fighting. And that's very important that they're left out of the battle. Number 12, think carefully about how the death of Patroclus affects Achilles. How does the death affect the relationship between Achilles and Agamemnon? This is really the linchpin here. Let me go ahead and see if I can see one of your responses. This is number 12. Once Patroclus dies, Achilles finally comes to terms with Agamemnon because they finally agree on one thing: the Trojans must finally be defeated. And yes, that is true. So they have a common enemy again, whereas Achilles didn't feel like fighting the Trojans for Agamemnon's glory, but he would fight for his own glory and for his own reasons, which he eventually, of course, ends up doing. All right. Number 13, how specifically does the Iliad comment on human suffering? Can you identify different episodes or passages that reflect on suffering in ways that are similar or different? Okay, that was one of the ones I was reading earlier, so I'm going to go back to that one and go ahead and read that out loud. In the Iliad, human suffering is determined by the gods. In Book 22, as Achilles and Hector are charging at each other with their spears, the poem adds a break. Darn it. Break of italicized words that give the metaphor between human suffering and nature's suffering between predator and its prey. It talks about the eagle swooping in to grab the lamb or hare, which also compares Achilles to strategically finding the weak spot in Hector's armor. The same goes in Book 16 when Hector kills Patroclus. Some italicized words discuss a boar and a lion at a spring in the mountains, and the lion comes out on top. This was the same for Hector and Patroclus. Hector was the mighty lion who was stronger and more strategic, while Patroclus was a little weaker. When both Hector and Patroclus died, they were covered by death's veil. Other human sufferings could also be Achilles' reactions to his dead cousin and the temporary absence of Briseis. He did not handle those humbly. Even Priam suffered the loss of his greatest son and got the nerve to go talk face to face with Achilles. Human suffering is greatly portrayed in the Iliad and displays what the people of Greece and Troy thought about death and unfair circumstances. Yeah, I can't really say it any better than that. Maybe give a few more examples, but yes, certainly the gods play a large part in human suffering. Humans do too. But there's several examples in the book, many good ones in this reaction that outline that. Okay, let's see, I guess this is 14. What are the main differences between Achilles and Hector? How do you feel about Achilles and Hector after Hector is killed? How do you feel about what the Achaeans do to Hector's body, which is laid out to rot? Let's go ahead and read a response here. Achilles is known for his power and his close relationship with the gods. He presents himself to be all the great qualities needed in a hero. Although, on the contrary, his inner flaws of untrustworthiness. Just making sure I'm reading the right one. Yes. Being unreliable and his emotional outbursts are all qualities that do not strike out of that of a hero. Hector, on the other hand, comes across very differently. Hector is known for all the opposite characteristics of Achilles. And this is kind of a foil. We saw this in Gilgamesh, such as accountability, responsibility, and known to be a very tender, family-oriented man with much love in his heart. Although Hector is not perfect and does have flaws, his overall characterization, I would say, tops Achilles. After Hector is killed, I do not have strong feelings, but how Achilles goes about with Hector's body, not giving it up, does give me a feeling of aggravation somewhat. And this is really an insult to the Trojans. He's the crown prince, and they're not preparing his body for burial. If it wasn't for a god preserving his body, it would have rotted on the beach, which is certainly a very, very big aberration to this religious system. Finally, what statement does the poem make about war? Let's see. Let's look at one here. Responses here. Bear with me. I may be missing one. Well, one of the last questions talks about the scene with Achilles and Priam, and why does he give the body back? And the answer here is because Zeus sends Theus to tell him that Hector's body is to be ransomed. The encounter of Priam and Achilles is transparent. We can sense the mourning of loved ones and see the sympathy that each other have towards losing someone close to them. The encounter made Achilles miss his own father and Patroclus more. And really, this leads into the discussion of war, because this end scene where Priam and Achilles are crying in one another's arms illustrates how even the bravest of men are affected by war, that no one is left out in terms of the suffering when there is a war. And really, this also illustrates, the will of the gods will be done, or there's consequences. Achilles, being stubborn, doesn't want to give up the body, but once he's been told the gods say you have to, he becomes much more open to it. Okay, well, I hope this video was helpful in answering these questions and helping you study for test 1. I'm making this the day before class, so I'll see you guys in class tomorrow. Please let me know if you have any questions.